Hi, my name is Darren Joseph from HTJ.tax. We're the team that seeks to demystify this sometimes confusing world of international tax and the privilege of having a deep conversation with Mark. Mark, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Mark Morris. I'm based in Switzerland. I've been here for about 26 years. I've specialized in automatic exchange of information, which originally was the EU Commission's EU Savings Tax Directive. And that went on until about 2014, and they scrapped that and they adopted the OECD's FATCA made into CRS.
So can you share with us what it is you do professionally?
Primarily, I provide custodial services for trusts to hold underlying entities or partnerships or unincorporated funds. So what I do is I provide the administration services for the custodial. I don't do the actual custody. And later on, I'll explain what administration services for custodial is. And I'm an expert in CRS and CARF, and I certainly know the intricate differences between CARF and CRS. We'll get into that in a later question, okay? I've published over 600 articles on LinkedIn, and I'm still writing about 10 a week. And I don't see other people covering 99% of the topics on CRS that I cover.
Okay, thank you. So having discussed the topics that we've discussed previous to this one, some people say that privacy is dead, but I think you're proving to us that not necessarily. There's so many loopholes in the existing system that if someone is well advised, they can remain 100% private. Am I correct in saying that? What are your thoughts?
Privacy is dead if you don't want to do anything about it, if you just surrender, which I would say the majority of people, they don't know how, they haven't learned. They just said, I've got an account, I'm going to be reported, so I'll report. But for the large ones, there's so many loopholes. Singapore's got another one with rich Chinese. They come and get a work permit, they rent a cheap apartment in Singapore, and then they just show the bank, I'm resident in Singapore, my bank account is in Singapore. And another core principle of CRS and FATCA is you don't report when the person is resident in the same jurisdiction as the financial institution. So I know personally people with 50 million, 100 million, 500 million that have come to Singapore with this work permit and this rent an apartment, and then the Singapore banks or trust won't report because you're resident in Singapore. Singapore institution will only report if you're resident somewhere else.
Right, okay. Okay, so there's no reporting, but the Singapore banks, especially in the wake of the scandal that happened around summer 2023, they are pretty intense in the KYC AML processes, right?
Well, Singapore government makes it easier to say I'm resident here, because if you've got the work permit and the banks want to see that you actually live here, so they rent an apartment, and then you're following the laws. I doubt that the banks are going to go the extra effort to say you've only got a work permit here and you've got a rented apartment, it's not bought. There's something in the tax treaty, it's called the Center of Vital Interest. And you're supposed to ask a lot of questions. Where's your pets? Where's your health insurance? Where's your car? Where's your... all types of questions that indicate that you're resident somewhere else. Okay, which social clubs do you belong to? Where did you go to the dentist? There's 50 questions, half are social, half are business. Where did you hold meetings, etc.? But I've yet to see any bank that adopts the OECD Center of Vital Interest. They just look at the first one is, where do you have a key to get into the door 24 hours a day, 365 days? That's if you've got a key to an apartment or a house, even if it's rented, then that's where you're resident. If you've got two keys, I got one in China and one here, but no one's going to say I'm in China as well.
Okay. But isn't that the same? I mean, let's step away from Singapore. Let's talk about UK. I mean, did somebody have an affiliated company or whatever, and they have a work permit for the UK?
It's much more difficult with especially EU and so on. You need to be in the country 181 days, whereas in Singapore, it's based on the permit and the apartment. To have a tax ID in the EU, it's 183 days or whatever. And they count every day on your passport. So I think Singapore is especially useful for Asians that want to give a fake residence.